I would like to know why you can never get to the end of a rainbow.
What's the worst disaster in Iowa?
What are your top 3 movies that involve weather?
Welcome to Weathered Questions, where we answer the questions on your radar.
Welcome into Weathered Questions, everyone. My name is meteorologist Jan Kaj, joined by Kai O'Mara, co-host and meteorologist extraordinaire. We're finally coming out of some cool weather here, and it's still winter. We've still got a long ways to go, but nice to break the cold and not to have your breath hurt when you walk out the door.
It's February already. What the heck?
It is. It's wild that we're almost barreling through here. Less than a month until meteorological spring now, which gives us some hope. Also,
days are getting longer. My youngest daughter was asking me why 2025 went so quickly. And I said, wait till you become 40. And then it goes really quickly. And all of a sudden, the whole do it tomorrow thing became do it next week, became do it next month, became never happening. Yep. So sometimes
it is actually wild how time works like that, isn't it?
It is. It's very, very odd. Very odd. But we've seen some weather in the U.S. for sure. No question about it. And if you're just joining us for the first time here in 2026, we are doing something brand new here on the podcast where we feature one cloud per week. And this week's cloud is actually very similar to a cloud that we addressed earlier this season, or earlier this year, I guess. This would be the nimbus cloud. So nimbus is very similar to stratus, low, gray, blankety, except it means that it's got precipitation going on, which in June, July, August, September, October, November, it's probably light rain, light mist, unless you're in a really, really cold environment, and then it changes over to some snow. But anytime you see snow happening in the Midwest, and it's light and it's fluffy and it's just kind of passing by, that's nimbus causing that. And it is a form of, different words can come off of that. Different cloud types can come off of that. Cumulonimbus is one that you often think about as a big towering cloud that's got precipitation in it, right? And
or
nimbus,
or that stratus cloud you just mentioned, nimbostratus.
Nimbostratus,
could be a thing too. So you can kind of piece all these cloud names together a little bit.
If you can dream it up, it's probably a cloud type. Between, because we got the 4 main families of clouds, and nimbus is one of them. Nimbus is one of the big 4. And so that's just simply meaning that there's some precipitation involved. And it can be part of a bigger cloud type that can bring you some severe weather. But a lot of times I think about nimbus as being that cool, rainy afternoon when you're watching a football game or doing something inside. You tortured me about the chicken chili that you just made. So that's where I would like to be with that, plus nimbus and mist and cold stuff outside. So
yeah, exactly.
That's essentially your nimbus cloud.
Yeah. But and you just alluded. No, you don't. You just alluded to it. The 4 main cloud types. So now this is our 4th week of Cloud of the Week, and we've covered the basic first 4 at this point. So that's going to be cirrus, stratus, cumulus, and now nimbus. So after this, we'll start getting into the more fun and funky kind of clouds. But those are kind of the building blocks of the cloud world.
Yeah, there's a lot out there, and sometimes they cause some debate between meteorologists. And I might have to make this a trivia question sometime. So if you're listening to it now, you might be able to bank it as a free answer for you later. But the sky is a very vast, open place. And
is that the trivia question?
That's one freebie. The next freebie, and I love it when this happens. It usually happens in the warm season. When you get a situation where there's a cloud or a front coming through or some type of low pressure system that's ready to come through, you can get stratus, cumulus, and cirrus all in one picture in the horizon. You see different things going on. We call that wind shear. Very cool. So you can indeed have a sky packed with different cloud types right in front of your eyes. It's not one cloud type or nothing. They can all exist together if the conditions are perfect. So it's very cool.
If you're lucky enough to, be somebody who gets to fly on airplanes, it's also really cool when you're going through and you can, punch through that lower layer of stratus
Yeah.
maybe, and then there's clear sky, but there's still more clouds up ahead, that you're getting to. You can literally see the different layers of clouds. It's also really fun.
That reminds me, hold that thought
All right.
for something a little later in this podcast. I'm just
Holding.
jotting a note down about it now so I don't forget it, because
The suspense.
when you
is
get above
building.
40, Jan, you forget some stuff.
All right. Well, while Kai jots his notes down, we're going to get into maybe our next topic. If you listened back in 3.7, we got lots of great content, and so we ran out of time to talk polar vortexes, because that was something that was very top of mind, and I think still is top of mind. As hey, it's only early February. We're still in the middle of winter. A lot of folks like to say, "Oh, the polar vortex is coming. Oh, we're going to get the polar vortex this weekend." So the question that came in is just, where does the polar vortex come from? And I really love this question, because so often it is referenced as maybe this big monstrous thing that appears like the boogeyman or something every now and again. But the polar vortex is always there, contrary to maybe popular belief. And so we're going to kind of debunk some of those polar vortex myths. So Kai, why don't you start us off with where does it come from, and how does it get to us?
Well, first off, each hemisphere has one. But with us being in the northern hemisphere, it's very practical to us. So it sits up there in the northern latitudes. And in an ideal world, we kind of analyze this from about 20,000 feet and higher. It is not a surface feature. It is a mid-level atmospheric feature, and it has been around as long as the Earth's been around. So it was around when your grandparents talked about big cold blasts. It was around when your great-grandparents talked about great big cold blasts. And it's around right now. And the thing about it is, yes, it's a mechanism up there of typically where the coldest air is in the northern hemisphere at a given time. It doesn't always stay at its pole. It can drift around a little bit. Very rarely, however, would the center of that ever drift this far south. But what happens is, and I'm trying to think of a really good analogy for this, and it's tough to think of one, but I can start to think of it. Imagine if you have a nice, thick piece of gum. And I know, just work with me on
It's not where I
this.
thought we were going.
Just work with us on this.
All right.
So
All right, I'm here.
what happens is you've got it, it's all chewed up, and you put it between your fingers of each hand. And so you're almost acting like you're about to stretch it out. So at first, you've got it in between your hands. Maybe it's an inch or two long, and you try and wobble it back and forth. Can't really do it. Stretch it out, and you start wobbling it, and it gets weak. And if it gets weak, then these little waves of cold can come down and then come right back up. And what you've noticed probably about most Arctic outbreaks is that they only last 3 to 5 days, and then they retreat. And it's like, well, why is it retreating? Well, it's just looping back. The Arctic air is looping back up northeast again. But there's been some research out there, and I don't even label myself in the expert realm on this. And so this is not a guess necessarily, but this is how I understand it. That a strong polar vortex tends to keep the polar air where it should be, north. Mm-hmm. When it weakens, it doesn't hold it in as tight, and it winds up breaking off different pieces down to the south as it circulates around the northern hemisphere. And so we can tend to see pieces of that come down, but every single cold night that we have, so think about it this way. If it's windy and cold and the wind chills are down around minus 50, that's probably an effect of that going on. But if it's clear and calm and you're down to 20 degrees below zero, the polar vortex might be in Canada. It might not even be in your neighborhood. And again, it's an aloft feature. It's just cold air aloft is really what it is. And so that's how I understand it working, and that's how I understand that. And that's why, when climate scientists get into this, they really wonder, why does it sometimes weaken the way it does? And why does it stay strong sometimes the way it does? And those are just answers that we don't fully understand yet. But they're there. That's how I understand the main mechanisms of it working.
And I think another maybe analogy to help kind of picture this, because again, this is a pretty deep scientific concept, and that's
It
why I
is.
think a lot of people don't understand it.
Mhm.
That Kai referenced that strong vortex and that weaker vortex, and it's that weaker vortex which is when it's almost the backwards way of what you would think. That weaker vortex is when further south latitudes will start to experience things. And so if you think about vortex, something spinning around, think about like a top, right? So if you have one of those, those classic tops that you've seen where you like push down on it and it just spins around and around and around. When it's really strong, when it's maybe spinning faster around, or that rotation is a lot tighter, it's just going to spin pretty straight up and down. Whereas as that rotation starts to weaken, so it's going to be compared to that weaker polar vortex, it gets a little more wobbly, right? It starts kind of wavering back and forth a little bit, and it's not maybe as straight up and down. And it's when it starts to get those wobbles that you can get kind of parts to break off, and that's where you're going to get maybe some different dips in say like the jet stream and stuff that are going to start to bring pockets of that colder air further to the south. So I don't know if that helps, but another kind of analogy, I think a lot of people have at least can picture that top, as a childhood toy, and maybe compare that a little bit. But again, like I said, this is something that is happening overhead, aloft in the atmosphere, and helping redistribute the cold air from polar regions down to latitudes that are further south than they would normally be.
The top is a much better analogy than the bubblegum thing, for sure. And as as you're listening to this and you're thinking about, there's a really big football game coming up very, very soon that we're going to eat a lot of calories when we watch it. When these receivers sometimes celebrate in the end zone after a touchdown, they'll spin a football.
Mm-hmm.
And that football spins beautifully on its nose when it's spinning quickly.
Yeah.
As soon as it starts to lose its spin, it starts to wobble, and the edges of that ball start going around. That's another good way to think about that.
Or even just that classic spiral throw, right? Like, if you get it perfectly dead on, it's going to spin around the axis. Whereas if you get it a little off, it's a little wobbly.
Right. And again, the Arctic air has always been there. It will continue to be there. A lot of people don't realize this. The polar vortex is still there in the summer. Mm-hmm. It's just not dramatic. But I think there was one time in September even, or October, we got a piece of it to come down, and I think it created some of the earliest frosts on record, because it can happen. But if you get a strong cold front in June or July, it may be playing a role in that. Most times it doesn't come down just as a temperature drop. A lot of times it brings with it some cold and some snow with it too, mm-hmm. or some types of precipitation, which is kind of like we've seen here the past several weeks, where the pattern went from nothing from mid-December to mid-January. All of a sudden now we're getting these Arctic shots, and we're getting more and more types of precipitation. So speaking of that, hit it, Jeff. It's become trivia time.
Today's trivia question.
All righty. Thank you, sir. So here we go, Jan. It's a true or false.
I'm ready.
Today. You can tell the age of ice based on its color. True or false, yes or no? We'll give you some time to think about that. All right, hopefully you've had time to discuss it, or just keep on thinking about it. The answer on this one, Jan, you want to give a shot at it, or do you want me to give it?
I'm pretty sure I know this one.
Okay, I'm pretty sure you do too. Do you want to give the answer?
I think it's true.
It is. It absolutely is. And it's not just because you'd see people's footsteps, tromping all over it, or you'd see sand and salt all over it, or discolorations. But clear ice is made, in the upper 20s to lower 30s. And so a lot of times, especially now that we are getting into the back half of winter, we see an awful lot of refreeze going on at nights. And what happens is you may have some hard-packed snow in your area that becomes ice, and it's sat there for a while. It becomes cloudy, more opaque. It's got some air trapped in those ice crystals, and the fresh stuff that wasn't there last night when you went to bed, but is there now, that's clear ice. So if you can see through the ice and it's clear, that's very, very fresh ice, very fresh. Whereas the older, cloudy, thicker stuff is probably several days old. So that's a good way to think about that. Hydrologists will also use this for looking at river ice as well, trying to gauge it. And the Corps of Engineers has an entire ice document that I used to have in my file. And I don't know if I've got it floating around somewhere, no pun intended. But they call it, I think, frazzle ice. The good part is I know a hydrologist and we can sort this out. But yeah, the icing is a thing. The color of ice is absolutely a thing. It can tell. It might not get it down to like 2 days versus 3 days versus 4 days, but older versus newer, absolutely.
And I think a really tangible way that you can kind of connect to this is if you've ever heard of the term black ice, which is black ice is not actually black in color, which can be confusing. But usually black ice is that like really clear, hard to see ice. And you hear a lot about it oftentimes this time of year when, maybe a new patch of ice formed overnight. And so somebody slips on black ice, again, clear ice, just called black ice. But you can connect that because it's clear. So it's newer and people don't realize it's there until they slip on it because it's a sudden, more sudden formation, I guess. Again, something that just happened overnight versus, that patch of ice that's been there for 3 weeks because it's been cold and I know it's there and it's very visible because it's starting to turn more opaque and white in color. And again, you can maybe see some of those ice or air bubbles and things like that in it. So that's just, again, another kind of more tangible way that you might connect to it, where the clearer it is, probably the newer it is as well.
Yep. And when it comes down to a friction point, the new ice is so incredibly slick. Nothing's been on it yet. No treatment's been on it yet. It's a very smooth surface. And especially if it's around 32. And if you're unlucky enough to come across black ice that has water on it too, that's some of the slipperiest stuff you'll ever experience in your life. And you're bound to go down if you see that on a sidewalk. So
you're driving across it in a car.
Yeah. Bridges are notorious for this. Bridges, other elevated surfaces. And another important part too is if your area is coming out of a deep freeze and the ground is really cold, just because that thermometer might say 36 or 37 doesn't mean that sidewalk temperature isn't 32. And so if there's water there that melts from snow melt during the day, even if you're getting in your car and going to work and it's 35, 36, 37 on your car thermometer, there may be ice on that sidewalk. And it's not just due to the ground temp, but these official temperatures that you see on the news and you see on these websites are all between about 4.5 and 7 feet off the ground. 2 meters is the world standard.
Correct.
Which is about Kaj height, that we've discussed several times.
For those who know what the height of a Kaj is. For
those that don't know, the NBA career never took off. It's okay. It's fine. The temperature difference between 2 meters in the ground can be vastly different. Vastly different. And when you're talking about the freezing point, it can mean absolutely all the difference. Speaking of measuring weather, we measure wind at 10 meters. And Jan, I understand that a question came
just like 5 Kais.
Yeah. That's a lot of Kais. That's like afraid of heights level now. You don't want to do that. But I understand a question came in for us, Jan, regarding wind. Who sent that in and what's it about?
Yeah, Lisa in Johnson asked us some questions about wind, and she asked, why does wind normally die down at night, but then followed it up with, but sometimes it doesn't. So what's going on there? So we had this was actually a conversation that I was fortunate enough to have in person. And Lisa was first asking about the wind dying down at night, mainly during kind of warmer weather, right? Summer, fall, and asking about like, it seems to be kind of windy during the day, but then as soon as the sun sets, the wind goes away. What's going on there? And so we'll talk about that here a little bit, but to go with that, but sometimes it doesn't part, that was a much more recent addition to this question. And that just happened here within the last couple of weeks, because obviously right now we are not in the nice summery season. And so when we're getting really big gusts of wind and bursts of wind that maybe aren't seemingly driven by day versus night, what's usually happening there is you have a big pressure system moving through. So, maybe you have a cold front that's blowing in, or sometimes a warm front, right? A front is usually going to have shifts in various kinds of weather. Wind is one of those. Temperature is one of those. Pressure is one of those, and pressure drives wind. So what usually happens if wind is seemingly like it's just all of a sudden really, really gusty and it is just howling day or night, no matter what's probably happening is you have a big change in weather due to probably a low pressure center that is moving through your region. So that's what's happening when wind doesn't change. Kai, do you want to dive into a little bit of why that wind might follow that day versus night trend, something we call diurnal trend?
Sure. Yeah. And that's just nothing more than a function of what we call turbulent mixing is what it is. And so in order for us to warm up, let's say it's a March afternoon and we're going to hit 60 degrees. Our low was 30, high was 60, and then our low the next night might be 28. By the way, that's totally feasible in Iowa. It happens all the time. What happens is the sun heats the ground heats the air above it. That air rises. Something's got to fill that in. And so surrounding air comes in to fill that in. And you actually get kind of a turbulent eddy going on. And as a result, that lowest 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 feet is actually rather turbulent. There's a lot going on there where the sun is driving that for us. And so there's actually really good research out there where we can look at what forecast modeling is thinking for peak wind gusts. And if we're seeing winds at 4,000 or 5,000 feet up and the sun angle is nice and high and strong, April and May especially, let's say there's a 30-mile-an-hour wind up there. Well, guess what? When that air rises up, the air that replaces it may come down, and we call that mixing. And so that air warms and it brings that gust down to the ground. Then all of a sudden, 3 in the afternoon, there was nothing at 8 a.m. because the sun was only up for an hour or two. Well, now 3 in the afternoon, we're getting really gusty winds. Your picnic is all messed up. And then at 7 at night, you got people out for a grill out and the wind just dies. And that's because the sun is lowering and the atmosphere is stabilizing now. And so the reason why a lot of that happens is actually driven simply by the sun, simply driven by the temperatures rising during the day and then cooling at night. The thing about the airplane that I'm going to bring back into this, if you've ever taken off in an airplane in the afternoon, that first 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 feet, you get off the runway and you might bump a little bit. And then all of a sudden it's like the plane hits a really smooth patch and the pilot shifts it and starts to roll it one way or the other. And then you start picking up some speed. You busted through what we call the mixing layer at that point. Mm-hmm. So as you were taking off and the bump, that's all the wind around you doing that. And then once you clear out of it, all right, that's as high as we mixed that day. And now you're into a very smooth atmosphere. And that's why the rest of the plane ride is usually pretty smooth. Same story when you land. If you land in mid-afternoon, it's literally called the mixing layer or the boundary layer of our atmosphere. And so that's why that happens on some days. And to your point, Jan, you probably aren't seeing drastically different weather before or after days like that. Whereas in your example, and what probably fueled Lisa's question was the number of blizzard warnings we've had this year, where it's just been windy all night long. And it's because we woke up one day and it was 30, and then the next day it was 15 below. Big change. So that's how that wind works. And that the thing about that mixing is we can actually forecast our daytime highs off of that. So not only do we have an idea of how windy it may be during the day, but we also have an idea of how warm it may be during the day. So we actually use that technique just about all the time. Most forecasters should be using that in their day-to-day operations if they're at least doing it right.
Wind is so important to forecasting in many different ways, right? It can move in warmer pockets of air. It can move in colder pockets of air. And then additionally, it can, as that wind is mixing, that will actually help stabilize the temperature. Whereas if you don't have wind, often you'll have bigger discrepancies in your temperatures from, say day to night. just because that air isn't being mixed around as much. So yeah, it absolutely plays an important role when it comes to all kinds of forecasting.
Yep, agreed. It makes the world go round, quite literally. Well, I tell you, we've come to an end of another episode here of Weathered Questions, and we appreciate everybody listening in. You have not wasted a perfectly good half hour of your time, but just 25 minutes of your time this time. But we appreciate you
and hopefully not
in.
wasted.
Yeah, of both of us just talking about weather, but this thing just keeps coming. We keep getting questions, Jan. It's great. And if you think about this, this is month number 8 of doing this show. Yeah. So we're closer to the 1 year point than when we started. So this is pretty wild stuff, pretty awesome stuff. Hey, don't forget about Valentine's Day. It's coming up. It's right around the corner. Don't be one of those guys, fellas, that's at the last second. We know better. Don't do that. Encourage everybody to submit your questions or comments to weatheredquestions@gmail.com. We always want to know what's on your radar. You can email those questions to weatheredquestions@gmail.com. And it can be anything. It can be something that you didn't want to ask a family member. It can be something you didn't want to ask your friends, but you can ask us. We're a totally safe space. And if you want it just to ask the question, but you don't even want your name attributed to it, that's cool too. We'll answer your question right here on the program. So thank you very much for staying with us. Stay safe. We'll talk to you next time.